To begin with, we're going to take you back to 1911 and Irving Berlin's Alexander's Ragtime Band.
We did a program at the Oakboro First Baptist Church. It was a museum program and it was a full-blown thing. We had piano playing, we had it was just wonderful. And it had to do with the history of Oakboro and coming to the railroad particularly. So
we don't have the West Down players tonight, so you have to put up with us. It's not loud enough. Our program tonight, He Took My Thunder, is taken from the Centennial Program presented February 15, 2015. Two things contributed to the coming of Oakboro: the power line in 1909 and the railroad in 1913. Now we invite you to come on along with us for a glimpse of Oakboro's beginning and its 10 decades.
We'll turn the lights on.
Can't see. Can you see?
It began in 1910. Joseph
Ephraim Hartzell of Leo, North Carolina, married Sophronia A. Smith of the Oakboro area, and the couple moved to the Smith family land. Sophronia's family owns much of the land that becomes Oakboro. Joseph and Sophronia have 3 daughters, Maud, Dupree, and Beulah.
Maud married C.C. Furr, who built the first store in the area in 1905 near the intersection of the roads going to Wadesboro, Monroe, Marshville, Rocky River Springs, and Norwood, and the town of Big Lick at the time. Dupree married J. Ellis Thomas, who established a blacksmith shop in the vicinity of Furr's store. Beulah married Dr. Kennedy. These were the 3 daughters, who later owned the meat grocery store in West 2nd Street.
1909, Southern Power Company brings electricity to the area. The tall steel power line towers run from Monroe to High Rock.
On May the 2nd, 1911, a charter was granted by the North Carolina legislature for the Raleigh, Charlotte, and Southern Railroad. Norfolk Southern buys the charter, begins survey and buying sections of established railroads and laying tracks to complete the railroad from Charlotte to Raleigh.
The final segment of the railroad, 53 miles from Mount Gilead to Charlotte, is completed in November of 1913. The first passenger train stops in Fur City, Oakboro, on December 1st, 1913, on the way from Charlotte to Raleigh.
In 1913, Croson and Maud Furr have their family land surveyed, platted, and sell lots. People began to move to this fledgling town. The Teeters and the Hartzels from the thriving little town of Big Lick, just 2 miles up the road, the parent town of Oakboro. The Cobles from Rocky River, Prince Hartzell and J.M. Burns from Marshville. The Haywards from Mount Gilead, the Rosses from Monroe. They joined the Dunns, the Whitleys, the Hills, the Loves, the Barbies, the Udies, and others living in the Oakboro area. In 1914, the Bank of Oakboro organized.
The first survey, the auction sales, the influence of people to the incorporated town led to the incorporation of the town of Oakboro on February 15, 1915. On February 16, 1915, the official charter is read, adopted, and officially signed by the town alderman. J.R. Welch was the mayor, J.M. Haywood, mayor pro tem, H.P. Eford, clerk to the board, Thomas Udy, town marshal, other aldermen attending that night, J.F. Barbie, C.E. Hill, Dr. F.E. Hartzell, and C.C. Furr.
C.C. Furr was Croson Furr. Coinciding with the development of the town was the organization and construction of several Main Street churches to include the Methodist from Big Lick, the Presbyterian, and the Baptist.
Men from the Oakboro area served in World War I in medical and artillery divisions.
In 1918, Oakboro Big Lick High School was opened. The wooden structure is built on 4 acres by D.E. Eford land and 4 acres donated by the Henry Smith land.
As early as 1918, basketball becomes the primary community sport, as evidenced by the basketball goals popping up on the school grounds and around the homes. And later you will be given a fan from Oakboro, and it has this picture. There's also information about the stores and things that you see in that picture. It's the last thing on the line over here.
This is a time of growth, the 1920s.
The Stanley News Herald reports September 21st, 1923. Less than a dozen years ago, this was a farm. Today, it's Oakboro, a thriving town with good streets, electric lights, modern brick stores, a cotton mill, lumber plants, a good school, beautiful churches, and handsome homes. The territory now covered by a thriving town was a farm, partly cultivated, with the balance of it covered with woods and old field pines.
In 1922, agriculture is so important to the area that an agriculture department becomes a part of the Oakboro Big Lick High School.
The Oakboro Cotton Mill in 1923 is begun by Gus James of Mount Pleasant, then sold to J.A. Groves of Albemarle. Mr. B.M. Rogers becomes the superintendent of the Oakboro Mill.
In 1923, Oakboro installs a lighting system for the town. A franchise is granted to the Oakboro Power and Light Company to construct and maintain lines to furnish lights and power the community.
1925, land for the Oakboro Cemetery is purchased from Parrott Honeycutt.
1926, a new brick Oakboro High School is constructed on the same site to replace the wooden building that burned to the ground in 1925.
1928, Barger's Drug Store began operation. Men from the town acquired a back bar, and I've been told to explain that's the mirrors and all the wood that if you go into the Mexican restaurant now, you see. But that was originally bought in Charlotte and brought to Oakboro in 1928.
Yeah, I told James you better explain that back bar thing. That's a little funny. So, 1928, Barger's Drug Store, an attempt is made to improve telephone service in 1926 with a franchise from the Southern Bell and continues in 1928 with the Albemarle Telephone Company.
Time of progress, 1930s.
1931, the Mill baseball team began the July the 4th celebration in Oakboro in order to finance the games and the equipment. The town established a custom of having carnivals, games, talent shows, beauty contests, greasy pole climbs, sack and potato races, and boxing matches. On the 1st July the 4th in 1931, the Oakboro baseball team wins both games. Oakboro versus Mount Pleasant. Now, I understand they're still mad at us about that. Hugh Kennedy wins the boxing match. Curtis Gaddy gets the dollar off the greasy pole.
In 1934, the town petitions the state to pave Highway 205 to Red Cross.
1935, the town applies for a loan for a water system, and in 1938, the town votes for a public water system. During the summer of 1935, the sewer system and water system are put into place. Hands down, the best water comes from the well on St. Martin Road. According to Charlie Smith, the engineer says that Oakboro is the rockiest place he's ever worked.
1937, Margaret Watson Coble is responsible for the first school annual at Oakboro High School. Speed limit signs are added to Highway 205. They got it paved and then they added the signs. Estelle Beecham, the first woman to hold a town position, was elected to list taxes.
1939, Paul Strickland becomes the first fire chief of the newly established Oakboro Fire Department.
1939, a telephone franchise is issued to Albemarle Telephone Company to erect and maintain a building to house an automatic telephone exchange and additional needed lines. Also, the telephone toll from Oakboro to Albemarle ends.
Time of war, 1940.
World War II patent maneuvers. The U.S. Army, 2nd Armored Division, practicing tactics of war on the red clay hills of Stanley County, the Oakboro region. The first round of maneuvers is held during November 1941. Some 400,000 troops participate in this round of maneuvers. These soldiers are mainly recruits from the National Guard units up north. The troops are divided into two opposing armies, the Red Army and the Blue Army. General George S. Patton commands the Red Army. This maneuver ends a little over a week before Pearl Harbor was attacked.
The war began, and in July 1942, the 2nd Armored Division, commanded by General Patton, conducted a round of maneuvers in Stanley County. This was July 1942. Tanks were the strength of the 2nd Armored Division. Tanks come from Charlotte down Highway 2427, turn at Red Cross, and head to Oakboro, where the tanks are loaded on the trains. The trains are headed to Georgia to get new equipment and then be shipped to the war in Africa.
Sergeant Warren Coble is a B-29 radio operator on both atomic bomb drops. Sergeant Coble's crew is the only one that flew in both missions because they were in training to drop a third atom bomb if one was necessary. For the drop over Hiroshima, Japan, Coble flew in the Necessary Evil, the photography plane that accompanied the Enola Gay. He was sitting beside the navigator who took the photo of the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima. For the second drop, Coble was in the Enola Gay, not his usual plane. He should have been in the Up and Atom. This Enola Gay was the advanced weather plane that determined that the primary target was unsuitable and led to the secondary site, the bombing of Nagasaki.
Warren became a lawyer in Albemarle, by the way, as time went on after the war. In the Oakboro region, as all across America, the focus is on the war effort. The focus involved food production, metal drives, rationing, and manufacturing of war materials and defense plants, to name a few. Young men from the Oakboro area volunteer and are drafted to serve the country during World War II. Some gave their lives. Others are prisoners of war. Many of the soldiers were decorated for bravery during the Second World War.
On July 4, 1944, the Big Lick Oakboro area sells war bonds totaling $15,000. If you bought a bond, you got a ticket to Mays Theater in Oakboro.
That's quite a lot of money to come from a little town like Oakboro, $15,000 during the war. The Oakboro Church of God organized and met in the W.C. Clark Barbershop until the building at 712 North Main Street was completed in June of 1945.
On February 17, 1947, the Oakboro Lions Club is chartered with Mount Pleasant Lions Club as its sponsor.
In July of 1947, a polio quarantine is ordered. Children are not allowed out in public in Stanley County. I had three of my classmates came down with polio during, and I graduated in 1960.
Time of prosperity, the 1950s.
Stanley Knitting Mill was founded by John Rogers, Van Smith, Arthur Rogers, and Herman Miller. What started as a ladies' hosiery plant in 1946 grew to become a fully integrated national distributor of ladies' hosieries and other clothing.
Two Main Street churches complete new brick buildings and hold their first services in these buildings. The Methodist in September of 1950 and First Baptist in December of 1950. Also in the early 50s, streets other than Main and 8th Street were paved. Main Street we mentioned earlier, 8th Street went to the mill.
At the dedication ceremony on July the 18th, 1956, Mr. R.C. Hadley, the mayor of Oakboro, has the honor of making the first call over the new Hudson, that's 485, telephone exchange.
On February 1st, 1958, the Little Theater burns. The town and community come together to raise money for a fire truck and fire equipment. The 1941 model fire truck is replaced with a new truck obtained for $8,000. The town allots $4,000, and the businessmen and townfolk raise the other $4,000. Oakboro car tags are sold. The Oakboro July 4th celebration is started again as a means of raising the needed money and continues to this day.
This building burn in the town of the Little Theater, it created what we know now as the Oakboro 4th of July celebration. It's been going on for some 55 years since this building burned down, and it's still operated by the fire department. The rural fire department is organized in 1958.
In 1958, a period of extreme cold weather occurs, during which the town water is allowed to overflow through a vent pipe. This is done to prevent the water in the tank from freezing. This freezing overflow water covers the tree canopy near the base of the water tank, creating a veritable ice palace. People from miles around visited this unexpected winter wonderland. Several times it is so cold that Mr. Dewey Osborne, the school custodian, cannot stoke the furnaces enough to heat the buildings. Therefore, the students got a day off from school. We went till 9 o'clock and then we got to go home.
This picture only shows a little bit of what existed. This was out of the newspaper. It was all over the place. All the trees down below the water tank were covered. It was like a little paradise. It was crazy. Railroad business is booming, with more freight being moved by Norfolk and Southern Railroad at Oakboro than any other point on the line between Charlotte and Raleigh.
Signs of the times, 1960s through the 1980s.
In the fall of 1962, the 9 Stanley County high schools are consolidated into 3 regional high schools. West Stanley High School opens, and Mr. Oliver T. Cowan from Oakboro High School became the principal of West Stanley High School. Oakboro School becomes an elementary school for grades 1 through 8. Mr. Oliver Cowan was a fighter pilot during the Second World War, reputed to have shot down one of the very first jets ever in history. He said it just showed up in his sights and he opened up on it, and it turned out to be a jet. I think it was a Messerschmitt one. Anyway, it was a jet plane from Germany.
In 1969, the Oakboro Swim Club organizes.
In October of 1968, the Oakboro Branch Library opens on North Main Street as a branch of the Stanley County Library. In 1967, a group of citizens met, organized, and raised $2,500 to launch the project.
In the 1970s, there are 7 textile mills in Oakboro. Other businesses start. In 1975, Flame Refractories. In 1976, Rusco. In 1989, Seven Oaks Doors and Hardware.
In 1974, the 1926 Oakboro High School building was demolished. Former students and teachers salvaged bricks, curtains, and other items as keepsakes of their school days. In 1976, Norfolk Southern crews moved up and down the railroad track, and they tore down all the existing railroad depots that had been built back at the time that the railroad tracks were laid, 1913. In spite of the efforts of the Oakboro citizens, the Oakboro Depot, an important piece of our history, was lost.
In 1981, a wastewater treatment system is planned for the area.
The town of Oakboro recognized by Governor James B. Hunt Jr. in October of 1983 with a Community of Excellence Award.
In the late 1980s, the Oakboro Youth League purchases the Oakboro Lions Hub. In 1986, the C.E. and J.R. Teeter building at 109 North Main Street is purchased and renovated to become the Oakboro Town Hall.
Revitalizations comes to Oakboro in 1990 to present.
In May 1997, the wastewater treatment system is dedicated.
In March 1999, plans for the Oakboro Regional Museum of History began, and in April of 2000, the facility opens with a photo exhibit.
In the fall of 1999, thanks to the efforts of Bob Barbie, his friend Andreas Vetchler, and Terry Whitley, the restored drugstore and old Pickett's department store buildings reopened as the Fountain Grill and the Oakboro Music Hall.
In 2000, major renovation is carried out in order to save the Hatley building, which was built in 1913 and opened at that time for business as the Hayward and Cochran Hardware. Also, Stanley Knitting Mills, Oakboro's largest employer, closes.
In 2000, Ted Henson puts the Oakboro area on the map when his famous Antique Festival begins in Big Lick.
The groundbreaking ceremony for Oakboro District Park is held September the 21st, 2002.
Sidewalks on Main Street are replaced and extended in 2003. New street lights are installed.
In 2004, biodiesel is first delivered to Oakboro Oil Company for the Justin and Gerald Lee farms.
On October 6, 2004, the Oakboro Presbyterian Church holds its last service. The Oakboro Historical Foundation obtains the 1915 Oakboro Presbyterian Church through a generous donation by two former church members, Wilma Lambert and William Ross. The sanctuary and fellowship hall have been restored for community use.
The famous Oakboro Cruise Inn began in the summer of 2003. Thousands of people from neighboring towns and states come to our little town and experience true Southern hospitality as they show off their restored cars and enjoy the restoration results of others. On some Friday nights, 8 blocks of Oakboro are lined with cars. And you haven't lived until you smell the rubber from the famous burnout. Burnout is now a thing of the past, but it's a picturesque little bit of our history.
People still ask about it.
Yeah, they still ask.
The Railroad Museum, a replica of the Oakboro Railroad Depot, opens in May of 2007. The Railroad Museum was funded by a grant from the North Carolina Transportation Enhancement Program and is a joint project of the Oakboro Regional Historical Foundation and the town of Oakboro. Later, a stationary caboose is placed on the railroad grounds.
In 2011, the turn-of-the-century Victorian-style Cole Teeter House is donated to the Oakboro Regional Historical Foundation by its late owner, Moselle Teeter.
Thank you for asking us to share Oakboro. We grew up in Oakboro and have 1,000+ delightful memories and tidbits that we can tell you if you're interested. These photos that you saw here and the ones that are on the big ones that you see, plus the couple of small ones over there, are all part of the Centennial Photo Collection that Brooks spoke about earlier. We'll be available for questions about them. Come visit us on Sundays and Mondays 2 to 4, Thursdays 10 until noon. Tours of any of our facilities.